very welcome back to the show. We have our folklorist Shane Lehane with us. Shane, you brought loads of spuds with you. Now, to be honest with you, I thought I knew a lot about Good Friday and I thought I knew a lot about spuds, but I never brought both of them together.
Oh my goodness, Daddy. Well, I have to say to you, Good Friday is the day for spuds, you know, of all the days in the year. It depends, of course, when Good Friday fell. If it was early and if it was in March, that was the beginning. Well, Paddy's Day was the beginning for many, but Good Friday was always a day that you would plant things, and whatever you planted on Good Friday would be sure to grow, would have no difficulties whatsoever. When it fell late, as it has now this year in April, it would be the last point. People would be planting up to this point. So if people haven't got their spuds in by now, they need to get them in tomorrow.
Yeah. And they believe this shit.
Oh, absolutely, 1,000%. You know, anything on Good Friday, for example, would never go off. An egg would never go off. A hot cross bun that you would keep fresh for the whole year.
Is that because the resurrection? Is that what the whole thing was? Growth, coming back?
Everything was good on Good Friday. Anything that you set to grow. Garlic, for example, was another one that was, if you planted garlic, it had massive curative properties for the rest of the year. Fed to hens, fed to everyone else. But go back to the spuds for me for a moment, okay? Like, what I think is so interesting at the moment is I have a whole group of first cousins. We have a WhatsApp group, and as we're going through this terrible ordeal now, we're sending each other photographs of families and so on, and they're all showing me photographs of their potato drills, all their beds, and all my first cousins are planting their own spuds. And there's something about what's going on at the moment where people are going back to that kind of survival, and you know, making sure that we're all going to be okay, and there's almost like digging for victory during the war years.
But there's also, you know, if it all goes up the left, at least we'll have the spuds.
That's it. And there's that sense of having something behind you, having a stock of something that's going to be there. But what interests me is that despite their couscous, despite their rice, despite all the pasta and all of that, spuds are still a major part of the Irish psyche. I always think that in France you have the arrival of Beaujolais Nouveau. And
there's a big thing always, the first taste of the Beaujolais.
But for me, it's the arrival of the new spuds, the new potatoes. My goodness, I remember as a child when the new potatoes were coming in, you'd be running around the garden with excitement.
You'd eat them skin and all.
Oh, listen, the lovely Cant from Cork. Aroo from Cork, I am Aroo. Yeah. Do eat spuds, I do you. How do you like them? Big and small. How do you eat them?
Skin and all. That's
right. For the stomach, you're a not at all. So that's something that we all know. And like, what I think is, even if someone has asked me, what would my last meal be? I think it would be a plate of new spuds, you know, with loads of butter and salt and pepper. You know,
that's it.
There's something absolutely gorgeous about them.
Are potatoes interlinked with our psyche, and is it the famine experience, or do you believe it goes back a lot longer?
Well, I think the potatoes relatively recent, if you know what I mean. It comes into us, it gets established by the 17th century and so on. And what's interesting for me, really, Maura, is that people have forgotten that there was huge traditions of how people ate spuds. And one of the things I decided to do today is to bring in from
Kishon.
The Kishon. This is the Kishon na Plata, and this I have another one here. But if you were faced long ago with a big pot of boiling spuds, one of the first things you had to do, of course, was strain the spuds, as the fella said.
But they strain it in the Kishon.
That's it, exactly. So what happened is the pot gets turned over, all the potato water goes out here, okay, and the spuds get put into this, and without any table whatsoever, you have this incredible sort of idea of people eating directly out of the Kishon.
So everyone's pulling out of it.
That's it. And what happened is that was put in the middle. Now, if you had a big family unit, you needed a fairly large one like this, and in the centre then you had what was called a dip, okay? So you had, and what would happen is people would have one potato in their hand for like this, and very often what happened is some of them would have to peel the spuds, but in the absence of any knife or anything like that, people used to grow a long thumbnail and they used to use their thumbnail to peel the spuds in that sort of way. So this was the vernacular, if you like, response to need.
They weren't even guitar players.
No.
That is unbelievable.
And so they were around this. And
what was in the dip?
In the dip, in the centre, was anything at all that you could give it a flavour.
Not so much fat, was it more so?
Suet or something.
What was very popular actually were things as simple as a salted herring, maybe boiled up in some water, or in some water or some milk or something of that sort.
Okay.
And you had dip the dip.
So and leave flavouring.
Dip the dip and leave the herring for your father. In other words, everyone could get the flavour of it, but the man in the house got the herring at the end. Okay. But what was interesting was people would be, you know, peeling their spuds, and they'd come along and they'd say, you'd be peeling one spud, have a second in your fist, be eating one, be peeling a second, have a third in your fist, and an eye on the fourth. And lots of fellas on go, they'd peel the spuds and they'd be doing a stockpile for themselves at the side, you know. So it was really
getting all the peeling done.
Stretch or starve, you know. That was the idea.
So people sat around that. So people, that was the table. That was the table nearly.
I brought in a great illustration. I got permission from my good friend Christopher McCorrick in the Department of Folklore, and this is an illustration by Simon Coleman. A gorgeous illustration of a whole family unit sitting around.
See it here.
Sitting around one of the kishans that you can see here. And if you look carefully in that image, in the background, you can see there's a fine big table. A really big, well-appointed table. And you would expect people, this is back in 1949 that this illustration was
Why were they eating at the table?
Yeah, because the tradition was, Dahi, to sit around the basket. And you can see people here, this was the favourite, this was the usual way of doing it. So as we were saying that this was the if you like, this is what continued from the famine period and from the famine time as well. And there was other sort of interesting observations as well. When you boiled all those spuds, everybody could avail of it. And I have a lovely quotation here that I'd like to read you from Arthur Young, who came to Ireland in the year 1779. And he says, "Look out at the Irishman's potato bowl placed on the floor, the whole family upon their hands around it, devouring a quantity almost incredible. The beggar seating himself to it with a hearty welcome, the pig taking his share as readily as the wife, the cocks, the hens, the turkeys, the geese, the dog, the cat, and perhaps even the cow, all partaking in the same dish. No man can often be the witness of it without being convinced of the plenty, and I will add, the cheerfulness that attends it." So you had everyone eating from the same basket.
So you can imagine, Shane, when you go on, if you go on, say, as far as the Great Famine then, when you have all that building up to the Great Famine, all of a sudden there's no more spuds there.
But I was just going to say that it actually shows you why the dependency we had on the spud.
One third of the Irish population were dependent on the potato. And what's interesting is that a normal average person was eating up between 7 and 14 pounds per person per day.
Per day?
Arthur Young
Breakfast,
tells,
lunch and dinner.
6 people, he says, a man, his wife and 4 children will eat 18 stone of potatoes per week. That's 252 pounds. Now, if you and I were to put 252 pounds of potatoes, you'd be fairly big. So the quantities, and what happens, of course, in the famine is that literally that's the fuel. It's full of carbohydrates. What's interesting as well is the vitamin C content that's in it. So there's so many different aspects to all of this.
Brilliant, yeah, it's true. And they're so nutritious. You really are right. And at a time like this as well, vitamin C, we do need that. Shane, it's so great to see you. Have a wonderful Easter. Albeit an odd one, but great to have you. Now today we want to give one of you watching a much needed lift to celebrate Easter. We have €1,000 in cash to give away, but that's not all. Show Your Care, Hide It. It is the new Cadbury Easter campaign celebrating generosity, asking everyone to bring the magic of Easter inside their home by hanging eggs in their houses for their loved ones.
Yes, together with Cadbury, we are also donating over 200 Easter hampers to Food Cloud. To find out everything you need to know about all these eggs, hiding them